things that you might not necessarily want them to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
It was interesting. I taught in the public schools for 30 years, and then I went to adult education, and I actually had some adults in classes that I had in school as junior and senior high school students. And conversations with them was always enlightening for both of us.
Right. Yeah.
How religious are you about starting the meetings on time?
Well, you're our new chair, trustee leader, so that's your choice to make. I am okay with whatever you're okay with, but it looks like we are getting the majority of our folks here, so I think whenever you're ready.
Yeah, my preference would be to start as close to on time as we can, let people join us when they're able. So having said that, I will call this meeting of the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Work Group of the CJCC of Dunn County to order. And for all our loyal viewers, this is a monthly meeting of this work group. I am Jim Tripp. I am a brand new member and the brand new chair. So I hope you'll forgive me if I stumble over a few things or maybe everything. And we'll take it from there. First order of business is the calling of the roll. Sarah, I assume that you have a list of the folks who can, should, ought to be here?
Yes, I do. And the work group attendance can fluctuate from month to month, topic to topic, but we do have our core group here. So we've got Judge Jim Peterson, we've got Sheriff Kevin Bigg, we've got Clerk of Court Katie Shalley, myself, Sarah Benedict, and we also have Sandy Frigo, Criminal Justice Assessor. Of course, we got Jim Tripp, the chair, and then we've got IT support with Krista. If we do have more folks join in, I'll announce it for the sake of the minutes and for their attendance as well.
Great,
I think
thank
we
you.
all know each other. Maybe you're not familiar with Sandy Frigo, but she's one of my Criminal Justice Collaboration Division staff that works collaboratively with our assessment protocol. So she's spent quite a bit of time in jail, working with jail staff, doing assessments up front, and getting those reports to our DA, our defense, and the judge to inform those early decisions. But she's got her hands in all sorts of stuff, and that's why she's part of this group with the assessment protocol and some other things that we're working on.
She's the one you gotta watch out for in this crew, Jim.
Is it tough to work with, Sheriff?
Yeah, keep an eye on Sandra there.
I will do that. Well, it's nice to meet you, Sandy, and I'm looking forward to the day when we all get to meet in person again. That's I thought 6 months ago I was getting tired of this quarantine, but I'm really getting tired of it now. Sarah, one question about attendance. Do we have a quorum number that has to be met in order to do business?
No, we don't. The council itself does have quorums. The work groups, as I mentioned, the size and attendees can vary. So the quorum isn't as important. However, if we do get too low of attendance, that's a problem when decisions are getting made. So we highly encourage people to join us when they can.
Thank you. Okay, next order of business is approval of the minutes from December 3rd. Now, that was the last meeting, December 3rd? So it's been a while. I would entertain a motion to approve the December 3rd meeting minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Big moves. Clerk of Court Shelley seconds. Anybody have any comments about the minutes, additions, corrections, changes, complaints, congratulations, anything? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Staff report. Sarah. This
Oh.
sounds like you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, a couple different things I want to highlight. Our group, I think everybody knows this, but we had our CJCC meeting held on the 13th of January, so our first quarterly of the 2021. So we've got Chris Corpola as the new chair of the council, and now we've got DA Andrea Nodolf as vice chair. So she'll be in line for the chairpersonship in a couple of years. But we also were able to elect our work group chairs for 2021, and most of them continued on, apart from this work group where we successfully recruited Supervisor Jim Tripp to lead this group. Supervisor Tripp, we appreciate your willingness to lead up this group, and a little bit of unknown territory that you're jumping into, but I certainly appreciate your leadership and know you'll do a fine job. The other work groups really continued the chairmanship of those. So we've got Katie with data, we've got Brenna Jasper with our communications work group, Chris Corpola still overseeing our Stepping Up work group. And then we are in the process of making some changes to the advisory groups for our family treatment court and our adult treatment court, really looking to combine those groups. So we've got some more mechanical governmental things to do back at our executive, but hopefully those groups will be combined here in April or May. At the CJCC meeting, we also took a look at our overarching goals of the council and approved to really continue those into 2021. We spent quite a bit of time talking about those at the beginning of last year, and really wanted to come up with some broad strokes that we could really continue to push each year. So the goals document was in our packet for this meeting. So we do have outlined the CJCC goals, and a little bit on our agenda, we're going to talk about more specifically the work group goals and activities that we'd want to spend our time and attention towards this year. So that's the update on CJCC. As far as the TAD oversight that this group provides, that's our treatment, that's the Treatment Alternative Diversion state grant. We just wrapped up our 4th year of TAD. We've got the 5th year starting with 2021. So this is our last year of non-competitive funding. This funds TOP program and Sandy Frigo's position as the assessor. The grant will be open again next year, so we have an opportunity this year to really make changes to that program, ask for more funding if we need. But for this year, we've got everything locked in and really continuing as normal. Just a quick update. We did in 2020 serve 46 individuals in the Treatment Opportunity Program TOP. That is just kind of ongoing. Right now, there's about 16 that are active in that program. We generally want to increase referrals, and that is a goal that the data work group identified in their meeting earlier this week. We want to get referrals up. We want to get more people in the programs participating, and ultimately more people graduating the programs overall. Then I'm going to update, pivot to our assessment protocol and oversight. So this is Sandy's, part of Sandy's role. This group did approve us to make the change with our pretrial assessment tool. We went to the public safety assessment, the PSA. So we did hold training back in December 17th. That was recorded, but we had pretty good attendance. We had folks from the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement and our judges and the DA's office and our public defender as well. And that information is recorded. Really just wanted to give an update or an overview of what that tool is and how the scores are derived. At this point in the implementation process, Sandy is working with IT. They are helping us create an electronic form, and then we'll have to, there's also online calculations, and Sandy will have to run through about 200 folks to make sure that the calculations are correct and that our system's working, but then we'll be able to really provide it more wholesale, I guess, and where you're going to see that report switch. We're estimating maybe at March at this point, being that it's nearly February. Sandy did work out a process through the Sheriff's Department. So thank you, Sheriff Bigg, and to your staff, Sergeant Ormson, a method to get that national criminal background history, which we need on everybody. So they have a system in place that Sandy will have access to that information through the Sheriff's Department staff. One thing that we will need to discuss in the future is the other assessments or screeners that Sandy does. She does the mental health screener and the substance use screener. And that information is provided at that bond hearing. So if Sandy doesn't have to be doing physical assessments with a pretrial risk, we might want to consider some changes to that substance use screener and mental health screener. But that, I think we need to look more into our own recommendations. And I see that the DA is not on today's call, and I think she's going to be central to that decision. But I just wanted to put it out there that we'll have to make a decision on that substance use mental health screener in our process. So that's the update that I have right now for the group. If there's any questions, or Sandy, anything that you'd like to add?
I'll just add that I think from the last time we met, Sarah and I were meeting with AARP, it's Advancing Pretrial, about becoming a learning site for the PSA. And after Sarah and I attended that meeting, we've decided to opt out of being a learning site. APPR provides everything to implement the PSA on their website. So it's very, very well laid out. So we've just decided to proceed with that PSA protocol on our own without being a learning site at this time.
All right, that is the staff report.
Thank you. I have a list of acronyms in front of me that Sarah provided this morning. You folks have already used 3 that aren't on my list. So.
Yep, that's our newest one, the PSA.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to update that list.
I'm just going to start making them up. Any questions for Sarah regarding the staff report? Welcome to Chief Atkinson, who has joined us. Now I am nervous. I told Sarah a little while ago that I was kind of nervous about doing this. I've watched some of the past meetings where the chief has chaired, and I've got some pretty big shoes to fill, and a pretty steep learning curve here. So bear with me, folks. The next thing on the agenda is introductions and comments, and most of you I know. But what I'd be interested to hear from you is something about the direction that you would like this group and thus the CJCC in general to move in. If I read the past minutes correctly, this group has an opportunity to look at, I may say this badly, but look at initiatives, evaluate them for their evidence-based feasibility and productiveness, and then make a decision on whether implementation or adoption by Dunn County would be appropriate. So I'd be interested to hear what you see and what you think about in terms of what's coming up in in 2021 for Dunn County. So with that, I'm going to introduce myself first and kind of tell you where I'm coming from a little bit. First of all, I have no background really in law enforcement or the kinds of efforts that I think go on here, which are designed, if I'm correct, to reduce recidivism, enhance public safety, address some of the problems of that crime and criminals present to the county. I really don't have any background there much at all. But I do have a 50-year background in education. I've told folks that I stood in front of my first classroom in 1966. And I stood in front of my last classroom in 2016. So a full 50 years, 35 years roughly spent in the public schools, junior and senior high school, and then some scattered things with adult education. Last 10 years of my career, I spent as a safety trainer, specializing in asbestos and lead certification. So I do have some background and experience there, which might come to bear at some point. But I don't see it as my role to initiate ideas and programs at this committee. But I think I can facilitate what you folks want to do a little bit. And I know that one of the items of discussion when my name first came up for this position was a closer link with the county board. And I will be very happy to fill that role because I have a deep and strong belief in what this group hopes to achieve. So that's where I'm coming from. Is there anybody who would like to volunteer to introduce themselves and give me some sense of where they want to go from here? Oh, by the way, I just noticed this. I've got a guardian angel sitting on my head. I don't know how clearly you can see that. So I don't know if that's a sign or what that is, but that's a piece of ivory I brought back from the Orient 60 years ago, gave to my godmother. When she passed away, I got that in the will. So let's hope that that's a good omen. Now, back to business at hand. Is there anybody that would like to begin? Should I just call on people according to the way I see them in my screen? All right. Chief Atkinson, you're nodding your head and you get the first nod.
Now that's what I get for agreeing with you, right? So I'm Eric Atkinson, Chief of Menomonee Police Department, and I'll be real brief. I think the evidence-based decision-making group is probably my favorite work group, and the reason is it really does help drive some of the system changes that we have in Dunn County. And a lot of great programs have come out of that, and we've experienced a lot of success and collaboration. At least for what I'm looking for in 2021 and moving forward, is just to one, help continue to drive us to look for best practices on how to make sure that we're having equal opportunities with equitable outcomes for people that participate in our criminal justice system. And then, of course, anything that you see from a person who's an elected official is what your constituents are looking for. What are their concerns? And then bringing them to us. Sometimes people are not always that comfortable coming forward and asking questions, or because either one, they might feel they're embarrassed or don't have trust, or maybe they don't even know what the right question is. But if you can help facilitate that discussion, I know I would be grateful. And then the other part too is at least from the standpoint, from whatever initiatives that we start to work on or investigate, you share that information with the county board. As a city employee, I have a city council, but I think it's important for both of our governing bodies to understand what it is we're doing, so that way they know they're okay with that, their constituents are okay with it, and to make sure that taxpayer dollars are being wisely spent and providing the kind of outcomes people want. So those are my expectations that I have, at least, and what I'm hoping to move forward with here in 2021. And thank you for taking over the chairmanship for this group.
Thank you, Eric. Judge Peterson.
Well, the problem I have is trying to keep from going on and on too many different areas. I chaired this committee when we started the work group, or at least when I, was a new judge. And I want to run to my bathroom and grab one of my notes off the mirror that I look at every day that reminds me of the various things, such as core values and, respect for some of the keys to collaborating and developing a collaborative culture. And it's very important, to respect the discretion that different decision makers have. For example, the sheriff and, other law enforcement, the police department, as well as the district attorney, and then the judges. I mean, everybody has an area where they have a responsibility. So, that core, some of those core values about collaborating is really important in this work group. But it's interesting that you had mentioned, your background. I know that you and I have had a chance to visit a little bit informally in the past. And one of the things that really hooked me on evidence-based decision-making and evidence-based practices were analogies to other fields, and the medical field in particular, and the evolution of the medical field and certain things that they have learned. For example, washing your hands thoroughly helps prevent infections. And it sounds like it's simplified, but there are a number of things that are done in various fields based on science. And some people think of behavioral science or political science as pseudosciences. Some of my friends that were math majors used to pick on me. I was a political science major, but I think it's important. Social science is important. We have areas where there's strong disagreement. It's unfortunate because that's not really that productive. But as Chief Atkinson has pointed out, that we have a duty to deliver a good product or the best product possible, and be very responsible with the use of tax dollars. And I think that's one of those areas that this group really has to focus on, because if we're doing harm, for example, the medical field, one of their oaths is do no harm. And when we're dealing with the public, there are things that we could do if we, for example, one of the evidence-based practices is how a judge treats people in court. If a judge doesn't treat people well and is not polite, and doesn't treat people with dignity and respect, that potentially could lead to higher recidivism rates. People that get angry with the system. If you notice, they had the riots in Kenosha, they burned down the probation office. That was one of the things that happened. There were apparently a lot of anger directed towards the system there. In Minneapolis, in the riots, burned down a police department. Well, there are things that we can do, whether it's a judge or whether it's the clerk of court or whether it's law enforcement officers or corrections officers, to make things worse. One example I'll give you, for example, is I don't know if you remember during the Iraq War and the Abu Ghraib prison deal, how that actually cost a lot of American lives, that mistreatment of people, that was documented, and, pictures all over. So, some of the basics that we have to look at is what can each player in the system do in order to, meet those goals of, collaboration, and again, being very good stewards with the taxpayer dollar. And, because we know that money is tight, and it's every year there's, difficulties with budgets, whether it's the city, the county, or the state. And so, and we don't want to be also spending money on things that are just a waste. One of the things that we're find out, for example, in our treatment courts, that for behavioral psychology and for have fidelity to the model that is shown, evidence-based practices to be, can be very effective. It sometimes shorter jail sanctions, and maybe, in response, quickly in response to violations is more effective than longer jail sentences with a much more delayed response. But that just gives you like an overview from our perspective. And I think one of the things that's really important for having these work groups is to continually look at what we're doing, make sure that, you know, we're trying to continue to nurture that culture of collaboration, and that we do, again, try to not do harm. You know, if what we're trying to do is change behavior with people, then we focus on proven ways to change behavior. If we are trying to protect the public, then there are other things that we do. For example, you know, some people have to go to prison for a very, very long time in order to protect the public, and that's just the way it is. But other people, for example, your low risk offenders, if we put them in jail or we send them to prison, they may become a worse problem for us in the community later. So, you know, to be thoughtful, and I think, and so I think having an education background, not being an insider in the criminal justice system, I think is really a good thing, because you bring a perspective and a background that's really consistent with what we're trying to do. So, you know, if you're teaching people about, you know, safety in various fields, I mean, it's not all that different, because there are certain principles that are known to be effective, and some things that are known to cause problems. So, you know, again, how we treat people, I think, is one of the most important things. But you know, public safety, again, I think we all agree that public safety is really a big mission. So you hit the nail right on the head. And before I ramble on too much, I think that I'll just leave it at that. But I'd be happy to have, you know, discussions with you, you know, informally, if there's any area where you'd like, you know, to learn more or to get some feedback. And also, given that, for example, with our treatment court, you know, I'd invite you to maybe to watch. You know, you can either watch it on a live stream, or you could even, you know, come in by Zoom, and then after maybe watching a few sessions, and you know, we could talk about what we're trying to do, what we do, and why we do it. But that is it's a, you know, it's not a thing you just do and then it's taken care of. It's like you have to constantly be trying to look at the fundamentals, make sure that you're doing what you need to do. As Judge Smeltzer would say, you're always trying to up your game and, you know, and deliver a quality product. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Clerk of Courts, Katie Shalley, you're next on my roster here.
Perfect. Well, I'll be honest, EBDM is new to me. I've only been clerk of court for a couple of years, and prior to that, working in the courts, I just did things because I was told to do. You know, I mean, there was policies and procedures, and you just did that. So for me, this is a whole new learning curve as to the treatment courts. When I worked in Eau Claire County and Dunn County, we had treatment courts. They existed, but I've really gotten to understand why we're doing what we're doing, what the goal is, what the outcome is hopefully going to be for our end, you know, the people involved, the public, even just for staffing too. I think for me, I'm trying to communicate back to my office why we're doing what we're doing, why we're doing the pre-charge. I think the old mentality was they did the crime, they pay the time, lock them away, put them away. Why are we doing these extra things? So for me, I think I'm still doing a lot of learning and trying to communicate with others, but a lot of my attendance for this is also prevalent on the data work group. You know, some of the ideas that are brought forward, we also discuss in data, and I have a lot of access at my fingertips with the computer system of the courts to look up things. I mean, how many cases do we have that if we change something, would it evolve? Is it going to be for the better or more efficient? So I think just collaborating, me keep learning, and, you know, giving insight where I can is kind of my goal for this year, and providing any resources that I can for anybody on the committee, I'm more than happy to do so. So that's kind of my spiel for EBDM, I guess, at this point. Continue to learn and help out where I can.
Great, thank you. Sandy.
So I particularly enjoy working on the EBDM work group along with the data work group. A big part of my position deals with data that I collect from our pretrial population. I meet with the individuals shortly after they're brought into the jail. And through the various assessments and screening tools that I complete with them, I am collecting data on a daily basis pertaining to substance abuse, mental health, and pretrial risk. I think for a long time, the pretrial portion of the criminal process has kind of been long forgotten, but it's a very, very important part of the process where very important and long-lasting decisions that affect the defendants are made very early in the process, from things that we kind of take for granted as to releasing somebody or holding them in jail on a cash bond or other non-monetary conditions that might be applicable to them, affect that individual and their families and the community. So a big part of the pretrial assessment process, which we're going to be switching to, which is kind of my big thing that I'll be working on this year, is making sure that in Dunn County, we have a fair, equitable, and non-biased pretrial tool in place so that our judges, the DA, and the defense have, whatever information that I can provide to them as quickly as possible to make those pretrial decisions. So that's kind of on my forefront this year with being part of this EBDM group.
Thank you. Sheriff Bigg.
Yeah, I guess coming into this, I've been sheriff now for 2 years, wasn't involved with this group or CJCC much before coming into this position. And it's been a learning experience. I'm still learning. But the one thing I like about the collaboration is nobody will say our system is perfect. I don't think it's entirely broken either. Like politically, they're saying it is right now, but there's always tweaks and improvements we can make as we go. And I think it's going to take a collaborative effort for this type of group working together to make that happen. Whether it be claims of excessive force, when there's circumstances that evidence proves otherwise, that the officers weren't charged, things like that, to sentencing things. There's all kinds of things politically going on right now that certainly have some concerns for law enforcement, and I think we all need to have a voice at the table and say our system isn't perfect, but it also isn't broken. But we're always looking for improvement, and if we tweak some things and try and improve things, we're not going to change things overnight, but over time, I think we can make some improvements to our system, and it takes a collaborative effort of this type of group to be able to do that. And we're doing it countywide, we need to do it statewide, and we need to do it federally. So, but not all those people play well together like we do. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Kevin. Sarah, you're last on my list. Would you like to weigh in?
Sure. So I just appreciate everybody's feedback, and I think this is a nice way to kind of start the year with a new chair. This is also one of my favorite work groups, as I mentioned to you, Jim, but I think because we've got a lot of thoughtful people that want to learn, I think that's part of why I like it as well. Not just, I need to get out of this meeting quickly. Because I think it's a chance for us to just take a deep breath and talk about some of the best practices, but certainly education has been a big part of the history of this work group. And that started with Judge Peterson, and we did that system-wide evidence-based decision-making training and made the video. And Jim, I know you've been pointed towards that as a resource to get some foundational training. That was a big part of what we've done in the past, and then also the systems mapping, really learning our system and learning maybe some areas that we could improve on. But I think Sheriff nailed it right on the head. What we've learned is our system's not perfect, but we are not broken at all. I think the more we've learned about what's the best practices or the preferred practices, we're doing a lot of those things already here in Dunn County, and it certainly should be a source of pride that we already have a good system. So a lot of the changes that we're talking about are really just improvements, and really recognizing that there's a lot of chatter, there's a lot of challenges out there nationwide, but all of those don't have legs here, meaning there's things that are going out there in the world and in certain places that are unjust and unequitable and drive a lot of some of the conversations that we're having nationally. But I think the more I've learned about our system, the more I am proud of everybody that works in their system and really is professional and fair just from the get-go. So a lot of these changes are, they're not major challenges that we're facing. Some of them are, they are, no doubt, but other ones are, we're already doing really good things, and how can we make it better? So I think we all come from that approach of, we're not talking about things that are broken and need to be overhauled, and that's just not where we're at. I think this group also gives us opportunity to have those connections and understand what the different perspectives are across the system. As Judge Peterson was talking about, the discretion and the decision making that that our agency leaders have, that's important. And when we're talking about a system, that's really just a loosely jointed system that people go through. So we need to respect that decision making and autonomy and discretion, but then also how can we come together and work together? And this group has allowed us to do so because we've identified needs that helps us identify funding and then bring back some funding to implement those practices. And I think TAD grant is one of those examples that completely came out of this work group as far as what Sandy does every day and that assessment process. We designed the program and we got it up and running, and now we're seeing the benefits of it. So lots of good things have started in this group. And kind of continue on as they get stronger and grow some legs and move elsewhere or up and running as a program. But as far as this year, kind of one thing that did come up at the CJCC level was the possibility of an OWI court, or really looking into that. So that could be one tangible kind of area for this group if we did want to put some attention into learning more about OWI courts, the need that we would have for one, the different types of models that are out there. I know we've got a lot of changes in store this year with new judges coming on board, and they're going to be important to get trained and feel comfortable and talking in some of this language that we talk about, what you're learning, Jim. And they're going to be important decision makers as well as part of this. So we don't want to get the cart too far in front of the horse, but I think, as a council, we've identified OWIs as something that OWI court is something we want to learn more about. Not that we're going to get it up and running and starting today, but at some point, if the time's right and we have the need and we've got the resources, and it could be something that we want to do. It's certainly something we want to explore. And then I guess I'll just leave it at that. I think this group is just under I said I'm going to stop, and then I keep talking. I think under the leadership of Chief Atkinson, we also kind of pivoted more towards that juvenile justice, and we shined a lot of light on what's going on in that system, and learned about that Botvin life skills, that all came out of this work group as well, where we really explored that prevention is more important. That was an evolutionary process, but we learned that along the way, that prevention is really important. Evidence-based programming is important. And then part of the challenge is getting the funding for what we think is a good idea and what we want to do. That's another challenge as well. So we've got a lot of expertise at this group, and just a lot of thoughtful folks that want to learn and want to do better. And I think that's something we can all get behind. Now I'll stop.
Are you sure? Thank you, Sarah. A couple of things occurred to me. First of all, I really like what I heard today. I mean, I really liked it. The words respect and accountability and all those classic values that we all claim to have and hold are just seem to bubble to the surface naturally. And I really appreciate that. What I'm going to be interested to see as the year goes on is how that translates into, all right, what are we going to do? Because ideas are fine, but the world changes when people do things. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at. So, but thanks to all of you. It occurred to me about in the middle of your recitations that we ought to be filming this. And then it occurred to me that we are filming this. But seriously, I think people ought to watch the people that work in their county and have responsibility for some very serious things that may or may not have a direct impact, but have an indirect impact on their lives. And I think they would be well served to understand a little better the attitudes that drive those actions. So anyway, I've gone on long enough too. Thank you all. I really appreciate your comments. The next thing on the agenda is to discuss the work group goals and activities for 2021. And you have the 2020 goals, objectives and activities, goals to be determined. But I'll let Sarah take over here if she will and kind of direct us through this discussion.
You bet. I'm going to share my screen and pull up that document so we can all see the same thing. So as I mentioned in the staff report, our council did get a chance to approve, really carry over the 2020 goals to 2021, and those are around community safety, reducing recidivism, reducing costs, and then reducing that loss and harm to individuals, families, and community. Largely how we want to do that is through evidence-based decision-making and really identify areas for improvement. We want to maximize the use of evidence-based practices across the system. We want to operate collaboratively. We want to continually learn and improve the system based on our local data. And we want to enhance community and stakeholder communication and knowledge. So overall, that's the council's goals. And then each of the work groups has activities that they work on. And really this comes through both from the work groups and then also down from executive and the council. So we're all on the same page and working towards things. So in 2020, we, and some of these were ongoing and some of them were new, but the first one there, the TAD grant and top program oversight. So as I mentioned, that grant and the program was the brainchild of the evidence-based decision making, and we've had this as that oversight committee since then. So at some point a couple of years ago when we were devising the program, that's what we spent every meeting talking about, was the program development. And now that we got the program up and running, it's been more of just reporting out on the program and the stats. We do have those worked into our dashboard as well. But there's been, it's been the last 4 years, I would say it's just more of just monitoring to see if the program's been working as we intended. We're getting people in, we're seeing people graduate with the program. However, in 2022, when the grants open again, this would be our opportunity to make changes, ask for additional funding, do things differently, whether it's the same program or a different program. So I would recommend that we continue, that this work group have the oversight of the TAD grant and the top program. And then I would also, I guess, add the assessment protocol to this. And that's that piece that Sandy was talking about. Let's see. Number 2, develop a comprehensive juvenile harm reduction plan. So that's the goal that we had for this work group last year. And we spent the good portion of 2020 talking about juveniles. So that's where we really did get to decision that the Botvin Life Skills was probably the best curriculum out there, and we had a recommendation for that. This has been a little bit challenging on the funding side and the staffing side. So even though we've identified an evidence-based program, and I know the city's incorporated that into Project Hope, it's been more challenging countywide. Just thinking about the staff resources required for that curriculum change, and then the training involved, the time to get into the schools. So while we've identified maybe the curriculum we'd like to do, the actual implementation of that countywide has been more challenging just due to resources. And I'm sure Chief could talk about some of the challenges he's seen trying to implement that on the city's front, especially with COVID kind of taking over anybody's best planning that they had this past year. The EBDM work group also did number 3. We re-examined the proxy tool and potential for validation. So that's the law enforcement proxy screener, and identified that, yes, we want to continue doing that. We want to train law enforcement so they're know what it's for and all the different purposes. We did discuss validation, and that was something that seemed that we had similar kind of information by other counties that the assessment was valid in that it does get to that general risk, but we didn't think it was enough to get validated by a university or another research outfit where it would cost $20,000 to $30,000 to validate something that's been validated elsewhere. So that's where we kind of left on the validation tool. But we did reaffirm we want to continue using the proxy tool, and we want to ensure that law enforcement have the training that they need. Number 4, the reevaluate the pre-charge diversion program, utilization and necessity. We also accomplished that in 2020. So really looked, had some side meetings out of this work group with law enforcement, our DA's office. We expanded the list of charges that would be acceptable for that, really trying to reduce barriers for law enforcement referrals. Took a look at the outcomes of that program, really good outcomes where the majority of the folks that if they go through that pre-charge diversion are not coming back into the system, and that's ultimately the goal. So really just look to expand that. And as I mentioned, the data work group in their meeting earlier this week really wanted to increase the direct referrals from law enforcement, and then for the pre-charge diversion program. And then we kind of expanded that to all the programs where we'd like to see more referrals come in, more people get accepted into the programs, and ultimately more people successfully complete those programs. And then the fifth would be our catch-all, really explore that evidence-based practices and programming based on locally identified needs. So Katie mentioned her leadership of the data work group, and that group produces a monthly dashboard where we take a look at all sorts of different criminal justice measures and program measures, and that really is a tool designed to help us keep that month-to-month kind of tabs on what's going on. But we also use that to create our smash board and really look at our system across the board. So we are still, the data work group is still collecting some end of year data, but we hope to have that smash board for 2020 here relatively soon. And I think that's going to be an important piece for this work group, is to look at the data and look at some of it. And it's nice to have different eyes and perspective on it, because we can all kind of make sense of things a little bit differently. But us kind of getting together and looking at the monthly data, but then also that yearly data for areas that could be problematic or could be in need of some improvement. And that's kind of based on our local data. So that's just a kind of an update of where we are on some of these 2020 goals. And I think I'll turn it back over to Supervisor Tripp, but I think we are looking for perhaps some more specific activities that this work group can hope to accomplish this year. So I'm going to, should I leave it up on the screen or not?
I don't hear anybody. I've got it on another screen here. I've got screens all over the place.
Okay, it's nice to see people instead of just a screen. So, okay.
So my question is, I guess, the process that we would use to determine what our goals are this year, if I heard you correctly, aside from goal number 4, which I think you said has been completed, we probably would want to continue to pursue the other 4 goals in some form or another. Is there a prioritization process that normally gets goes through, or how do you want to proceed with this? I guess that's basically my question.
Right. So I think we do have the latitude of the prerogative of the chair as far as some of the prioritization. Part of what the executive does as well is identify priority areas. I wouldn't say anything is too emergent in that we have to take it as priority 1. I think that really can come from the group's consensus as far as what they'd like to spend their time discussing, working on, and accomplishing in this year.
So we've got 6 or 8 minutes left today, and I assume you like to finish right at 1 o'clock. You folks have schedules. I myself am going to take a nap when this is over, but I know that working people can't do that. But anyway, in the few minutes that we've got left over, I would like to get some sense of where do we go from here and what do we do next month? And if identifying the particular goals that we want to pursue is one of those things we should do today, or can we spend a few weeks ruminating and considering and thinking about these and establish those goals at the next meeting? And again, maybe past practice would be a guide for how you want to proceed. Anybody have thoughts on that? I'm looking at Judge Peterson and Chief Atkinson as former chairs. Is it for either one of you, if you'd like to weigh in, I'd certainly appreciate it because I'm floundering here.
Well, I think if, you have an opportunity to, talk with Sarah about what, people may want to have on the agenda for the next meeting. The nice thing is that, there's time for you to get up to speed because we don't have anything really urgent right now. And we do have these existing programs. And so, hopefully, you'll have an opportunity, to learn more about those things before, something big comes along. But when I was chair, I really spent a lot on Sarah, to be connecting with different people outside of the meeting, between the meetings, and we would talk about what we would want to put on the agenda and work on. So I guess that's, it's, I can't think of anything else to say right now about that. So
No, I appreciate that insight. Chief, did you have any?
Yeah, I think for, determining what you're looking to do for future meetings, one, I would take a look at just our goals and then speaking with Sarah on how that can be arranged and, or at least providing some guidance. The other part too is I would look at in two areas. Either one, talk to the different resources, that are within the justice system here, whether they're part of the judicial branch, like the judges or executive, like myself or the sheriff or Sandy, or any of those folks that might have some kind of interest or ideas. The other things too, I would just as just a guy who's interested in what is happening in a county and criminal justice, take a look at what's happening nationwide. And then if you have questions about it, whether it's things on certain reform models or mass incarceration, you certainly can bring those topics or agendas to this meeting to either one, learn more, see if there are initiatives that we can enact that would be evidence-based to move forward. And then we can basically do like a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis on any one of those types of topics. And that may help guide things that come out of this meeting, and then potentially to impact the executive committee as well for overall CJCC use. So if I had to offer my advice, that's what I would present, is just look at those kind of three areas. And really, you're just kind of limited by your imagination. So like I said, the neat thing about this group is that it tends to be one of the system driver groups to develop programming and research what's out there. So if you're interested in it, I wouldn't even hesitate to bring it up in here and then have a discussion.
One more thing.
I appreciate.
Sorry about that, jumping in, but I just saw in the news last night that down in La Crosse County that they are doing a questionnaire to the people in La Crosse County about law enforcement, about what could be done to improve. And that's an idea. Let's take a look at what they're doing. If we get a copy of their questionnaire and look at what's behind that and see whether that's a good idea or not a good idea. But and then always I like to have Sarah give us an update on what the state's evidence-based decision-making group is doing, so we have an idea what's going on at the state level. So sorry for interrupting, but
no, I appreciate that. Thank you for all those suggestions. Personally, I have an interest in the development of activities with youth, and so the what's that guy's name again? The training, life skills training. I'm going to want to pursue. I have an interest in the OWI efforts because I have a suspicion that that's an area that gets an inordinate amount of resources compared to any possible positive outcomes. And a third area is housing. I know that the health department is looking at transitional housing. They've got a grant. Well, Sarah's been involved in that as well, as a matter of fact, one of the drivers there. And I think there may be some things there. But we are reaching the end of our hour, and we have one thing on the agenda yet, I think, just one, and that's the next meeting date. Are there thoughts about, do you like to meet once a month? Is Thursday a good day? I understand 12 noon is a pretty appropriate time. All those things work for me. My schedule is pretty much open. Do you normally set next month's meeting date at this meeting? Or is there some other methodology that you use?
I always like the noon to 1 meeting because I tend to keep my lunch hours open for either,
Sure.
well, before COVID lunch meetings and those kinds of things. But it
Right.
makes it handy to meet during this time because keep it free. So my preference is to keep it at noon to 1 once a month if possible.
That sounds fine. Do you like to meet on a Thursday? Is this a particularly good, appropriate, difficult day? Anybody have choices about days of the week?
Thursdays are better than Fridays and Mondays, I can tell you that.
Nobody meets on Friday and Monday.
I would agree.
Well, some of us.
Sheriff.
How about if we set the last Thursday of February at noon as our next meeting day? 10 time? Does that work? What day is that? About the 26th,
I think it's the 25th.
25th?
I'm looking.
25th.
Yep, 25th.
All right, if we set the 25th at noon, we can always change things. If difficulties arise, we can make changes. But for now, let's establish February 25th at noon as our next meeting. And again, Sarah, I'm sure we'll send out the appropriate paperwork and notices and reminders and Zoom connections, and we'll go from there. And I want to thank everybody for your forbearance and for your enlightening the opportunity to enlighten me. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Thanks to Chris DeVind for the technical support. Thanks to Sarah for setting things up, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you for willing
Thank
to
you.
serve.
Bye-bye.